Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon.
This is a conversation with a former student, Jessica Maura, who is working in the payroll system of a large company. So on the surface, I'm thinking, wow, what can my listeners learn from someone who does payroll? And here's the answer. An awful lot about the nature of practice as it is lived through the experience of a very fine young woman. And so her responses to my sometimes a little crazy questions were so upbeat, so generally optimistic, and she loves to learn. And she has gone through, as everyone has in corporate America, a tremendous amount of changes in the work itself and therefore in herself. So yeah, it turned out to be quite a conversation. And the coincidences when I posted a reflection on episode 6 with Peter Vale today in LinkedIn and Facebook, we were featuring his conjecture that change has put us in a position where we all have to become reflective beginners. We have to learn again and again and again. And it was perfectly mapped on to what Jess has been through and loves being through, loves the variety and change regarding how to make sure everyone is properly and effectively and fairly paid in her company. So there was the LinkedIn, Facebook post with Peter's conjectures in the book. I linked it to the place in the book where Peter made a quote. And now I finished this conversation with someone whose comments, as you'll hear, are just about like I planned the connection between the two. And I didn't. And that's the fun of this. There's so much to learn, and almost everything is connected to everything. So here is Jess Maura. Well, folks, whenever I get a little bit homesick for my professorial career, which is now past me by 6 years, I love to find out what former students are doing, which you've heard me do fairly regularly over the last 180 episodes. But I came across a reference to Jess Maura in LinkedIn, which said Jess has been promoted to payroll specialist.
Yep.
For a really wonderful company called New Motion. And I think it's wonderful because they make sure that people who have mobility challenges get the right combination of equipment they need. Does that sound pretty close to what New Motion does?
Exactly. Yep.
When around 2001, Peter Vale, who has brought me into this work, focus on practice, and who had been my favorite teacher at University of Connecticut, underwent minor surgery, which led to an infection in his spine column, and that led to him being paralyzed for the rest of his life.
Wow.
So in a way, we're reconnecting with Peter Vale in regard to how important it was for him to have every means of mobility possible, certainly various wheelchairs, but there were a lot of other things that I remember him telling me about, that because he kept up the good fight. He was right to the end, really wanting to be as with people and with life as possible. So that touches me that we're having this conversation. But also, when we first caught up prior to this, we talked about what your life was like at CCSU, and of course in my class. So let's roll the time bar back.
Sure.
And what are some of your fondest recollections of your years at CCSU?
I really liked, well, thanks for having me. It's been great to catch up.
Welcome.
It's been great talking to you. Like you said, just bringing back a lot of memories. It's been longer than I thought. It's so funny how time flies. You don't think about it until you're like, oh, how long was that? Oh, yeah, I remember that year. Oh, let's not think about that anymore.
What was that year that you finished?
2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a little long ago, but it was fun. I have always lived in Connecticut, so it was really easy and convenient for me to continue working my jobs and staying in touch with all the people that were still in Connecticut as well. And I came from a couple small schools, so just being able to keep those like tight-knit friends was great. I worked at least one job, sometimes two, while still going to school. I didn't live on campus, so I could work and go home and come back, save some money, pay off some bills,
Which is basically about over 60% of our population, which made it wonderful for me to be teaching management and organization behavior, because every day that you were at work, you were in the laboratory, if you will, of everything that our books and conversations and exercises address. So, I do remember that you had a very strong work ethic.
And it was great to be able to, I think a lot of people like go to college and they get a job that they know that they're leaving. So they might not try to advance, so they might not try to kind of push themselves because they know it's a temporary position. Where being at Central, I could push myself and I could say, I wonder if I can be a supervisor. I wonder how far I can go here. So taking on those extra training courses and taking on a little extra responsibility, I knew that it wasn't just a dead end and it wasn't going to be a waste. So it was a good opportunity for me to grow and see where it kind of took me instead of knowing that it was going to end. And I think that I probably would have had the attitude of, oh, I'm just quitting in 6 months, so there's no reason for me to try to be a manager here first.
It crossed my mind when you were saying that there's a sort of, I hope it's a cliche about rental cars. When someone has rented a car and something like I spill coffee or something, they said, oh, it's no problem, it's just a rental. Of course, nowadays the rental car companies have caught onto that, and there's quite a penalty if you don't have the car come back in perfect condition. But there was that sense of I'm just doing this for now. Yet I can tell you, over the fairly large number of former students that I've connected with, those first jobs were largely in corporations where there was eventually many ways that they could have stayed on and do. What was your primary and most pleasant job when you were still at Central?
Oh boy. Jobs are hard, right? Because thinking about jobs, I'm thinking about all the tasks that we did, and there's nothing that I did that I would continue really doing. I mean, I loved working at a coffee shop. I liked the casual atmosphere. I remember my bosses mostly, and I remember my coworkers mostly. And I have friends that I worked with that I'm still in touch with. I have bosses that I've worked for who I'm still in touch with, and I would go back to working with any of them and working for any of them anywhere that they went. So I think that that's almost more important than what I was doing. It's who you're doing it with, because I think that you learn a lot more, and it really changes your experience, the people that you're working with and the people in your management, if it was a good experience or not.
Oh, absolutely. And the signature of your success in that is that you are still in touch, quite a few years later, and would look forward in another world to be working with them again. I don't hear that often. That's quite nice, Jess.
Yeah.
Now, about the classroom.
Sure.
of course, the only course that you thought was wonderful was mine. So we can cut right through to that. No, but I'm kidding. I always kid about that because I was very proud of the students in my classes and the way we created some pretty interesting experiences. What about that do you remember about our classroom when you'd walk through that door?
About our class specifically?
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that your class felt like real world, like networking experiences versus, and you were like kind of guiding us through like how to have these interactions and how to have these conversations. But at the end of the day, it was all up to us to really have the ideas and what we wanted to talk about. And you kind of led us to articles or you led us to videos, and maybe like asked some questions, but allowed us to ask like the follow-up questions and allowed us to have that curiosity of like what we were doing next or what we wanted to talk to a speaker about, versus a lot of other classes where someone standing up front telling us their experience, we had to memorize it and then we got tested on it. And it was just a totally different experience, and it felt more like actual learning and growth versus learning and memorizing. And I really do appreciate that. Absolutely.
Well, of course, I wasn't just pandering for that lovely comment for the podcast. There's a method behind that, because this morning when I was putting out a feature in LinkedIn and then in Facebook, where I was reprising one of the episodes I had with Peter Vale, episode 6, the clip that I had used back then and then again was bringing back for the LinkedIn was him talking about how we must understand that change is making it such that we are all beginners again and again and again and again. Credentials, fancy titles, you name it. 2 years ago, and then many years before that, when Peter talked about permanent whitewater change, you just couldn't work on whatever you memorized with whatever you memorized. Even if it was a classic poem or something, sure, or some passage from the Bible. But ideally, in the world of organization and management literature that we were testing out of, and I say testing out to see if we wanted to have any of it in our life going forward, it was about taking the theory and then massaging it with others in your teams. And what do you make of this? And how does this apply to the video that Doc is showing and all of that? Because it was what both Peter and I believed is the requirement for becoming a beginner again and again and again. It takes curiosity, which you've already mentioned, and humility.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So I want to jump then to payroll. Now, of all the things going on in every kind of company, tiny to huge, and I know that New Motion is a very large company, what you said, we think payroll. Gee, that's just kind of standardized, routinized, regularized, all the I's. What could Jess Maura possibly be learning to grow by working with payroll? Now,
man.
And I know it's a terrible put down I'm giving you, but I'm doing it because I know you have a very positive answer to that.
Yes. Well, payroll in itself was a huge learning experience for me. I know in school we learned about like HR law and we learned about FLSA and we learned all about those big ones, but we didn't really learn about, it sounds silly, but we didn't really learn how to like calculate a paycheck for someone. And I know like someone gets paid and you're like, oh yeah, like it's Friday, you have to cut a check. Like you can't just take out like your closest checkbook and write a number on there and hand it to someone. You have to learn like what taxes need to come out and how much you should pay them and why this person gets paid more and this person gets paid even more, when to give raises and how to track all that stuff. And now, luckily, there's a lot of software for it.
No, that's putting you out of a job?
No. So part of me personally, part of what I love is learning the software. So I really like the HRIS is what they call it portion of it, which I guess is sort of an MIS degree, like management information systems.
Yes.
More of the IT side of things. And I get a lot of experience with that in payroll, which is great. And I really like to help design the systems. If there's a new department, like advising what numbers to use. And I don't do any of that in my current role, but I did that at my previous job when we implemented ADP implemented Paycom after using ADP for so long. We had to set up like a whole new system and like re-choose department numbers. And it was just so nice to reorganize it because everything was kind of, what number's not used? Let's just throw one in there. And it was great when we got to kind of start fresh and implement a new software and really like start from the beginning. But in my current role doing payroll, it's just been really great, like learning about all the different compensation types, especially the last couple of years with COVID. A lot of companies, including ours, has been really creative in the way that they're, I don't want to say incentivizing, but the way that they hire people, things like sign-on bonuses, retention bonuses. We had a supplemental earnings during COVID for like a year and a half for people that were still out in the field working directly with customers. So learning how to do that, calculate it, take into account overtime with the supplemental pay. And it was it felt like the last couple of years, like every week I was learning a completely new thing. And it was just so nice to see all these like different ways and creative ways that the company was figuring out how to really like reward people for their loyalty, staying with NewMotion, and really all the great things they do for the customers. So it's been really good to see that on the payroll side, and then also really good to be able to see it on the software side, like how to set it up in the system, make sure it's working properly, test it out a bunch of times, and make sure that we can get everyone paid as much as we possibly can.
Well, I can tell you, as one who really enjoyed getting paid all the years that I worked, that while, we go, personnel, payroll, they're just a bunch of people. I don't even know if
it's just paperwork.
I don't know if they have windows in their office. I don't know if, they're all kind of pale and sit in there all hunched over there. No, it's not like that. And damn well when you open that, now electronic, you open your file and it says, you've 13 cents is off, you fly through the roof. Who is it? Who are these people? They're cheating me of my 13 cents. And so I really do believe it is a crucial function in every kind of business. So it always puts you in the catbird seat in that regard. And all these changes that you beautifully mentioned in the last few minutes flow back in through the payroll system from the software side as well as the human side. And there you are. And happily learning.
Yep, it's great.
So back when you are in my class and I was basically changing up the subjects, the experiences, remember those exercises and the toys that we'd play with and the films that I'd have us watch. I was always preparing you for what you just said.
Exactly. Yeah. And just developing that curiosity and like rewarding it was so nice. And I think that I am a naturally curious person. I like to ask a lot of questions. If someone is like learning a new thing and I have nothing to do for the next hour, can I come sit with you? Can you send me the link to the webinar? Like I'm I don't mind putting myself out there and asking. If they say no, then that's okay too. I'll just find something else to learn over the next hour.
Man, that's sweet. That's sweet.
But I think that getting your curiosity rewarded for me is one of the best feelings ever. And it's one of those self-satisfaction too, because now you just know something that you didn't know earlier. And it's something that I can like stand a little higher knowing that I learned something today, and it's just so fun.
I love it. In fact, what Peter said in that little clip And we wrote about in the book On Practice as a Way of Being, a digital book now available. What Peter called it was a reflective beginner. Now, there's different than being a beginner from scratch, which you've been many times in your life, as all of us have. But what you just described with that hour that you had is that you're going to use it as a reflective person, meaning that you are going to bring that experience in, rummage around in your heart and mind about what it means, whether it's a webinar or a conversation with someone in production or shipping or whatever. And that reflection is what helps us grow.
Yeah, we've recently started doing, well, I'm sure they've been doing it for a while, but recently my manager and I have started doing, they're called AAR meetings, so after action reviews.
Sure.
I fondly refer to them as our pirate meetings, because but we started.
You snuck in a joke in my podcast, and
Sorry.
I'm supposed to be the funny one, Jess. After action review, very important.
So our pirate
reflective
meetings.
Activity, yeah.
Yep. So we have these meetings where we like talk afterwards after any like big thing that happens. And I'm the one that has like big ones are obvious. So like if we have a new acquisition or if we had like this huge department change or anything like that, we'll all have one on our calendar for the group that was working on it. But I also, like at any point, if there was just a really difficult payroll, I could just say, hey, can we have like a one-on-one to just go through like our wins, things that we can improve next time, just some things that like sometimes it's not a good time to come up with a new idea in the middle of running a payroll because there's so many other priorities. So sometimes I'll just put it in my little notebook and I'll be like, okay, we'll talk on it on our one-on-one or our AAR meeting. So then we have it's nice to have those like touch points and just be able to review, because I think a lot of the times I start feeling burnt out when it's new project after new project after new project, and they just all start to feel like they're running together and that nothing ever ends. So our after action review really feels like a good stop point, a good review point, and then move on to the next thing instead of still feeling like there's something like kind of looming like over your shoulder with something that's done.
Unresolved, undiscussed. And basically, if you might
that
recall,
closure.
Back to my class, my method there with the Blackboard system was to pose so many questions. Questions. Every piece of the module that we're in, I usually had 8 things and 8 sets of questions. But it was partly to reinforce this idea of pause and think. Now, the answers to those questions were not what was said on page 12 in line 6. It was, what did you think about that? What did you notice? What was missing? What was your experience with the team processing it? Remember, you guys did an awful lot of teamwork in those classes. And here you are looking at after action review as something that acts as a point of being able to reflect and ask questions and get answers before things fly. I used an example this morning. I'm really promoting this LinkedIn thing that I put up there today because I thought I was out there playing golf afterwards. I thought, geez, Dave, that was pretty damn good. Because my practice is I pull up the clip and listen. Usually it's only a minute or two, and there'll be one from this conversation. And I think, what will I feature? So I write up a little bit of the quote, and then I start saying, what sense do I make of it? So to make it a lesson in 3 paragraphs, the LinkedIn limit, and the readers, scrollers don't even want to stop sometimes, as we scrollers know. But here's something to stop and think about. I said, when I turned on the news this morning at 6 a.m., the lead story was a catastrophic national freight train strike
Mm-hmm.
that's going to do this horrible thing and that horrible thing. It's going to change the political dynamics. And, I'm like 6 a.m. and I hadn't even drunk the first 3 sips of my coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife says, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to our retirement fund? Will there be cat food for our cat, Billy? And that was the one that scared me the most. Because 20 years old or not, Billy can really make life miserable if that can of wellness is not open and in her dish before 7 a.m. So anyway, then I said in this little clip of mine, a little writing, I said, but by 20 minutes of 7, about 40 minutes in, breaking news, the strike is settled, or a settlement has been reached through the White House. And I go, whoa, that's how change is working now.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about having one thing on another and another just coming at you.
Yep.
In your business and your work. Well, it's also going on in your life.
Yep.
And we've heard and read a lot about burnout. We've heard a lot about what we call the mass resignation effect. The people in your age group are sort of saying, I've had it. I don't want to do this to myself.
Yep.
But you seem very happy.
Yeah.
both at the job and in the rest of your life. How do you keep yourself so happy?
One of the things that I really pay attention to, like I was saying, is burnout. I think that we're all burnt out, or very close to it especially if you don't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And so I've done some work just to notice like certain habits that I start doing and then I'm like, oh, like I haven't made myself dinner. I've been doing a lot of takeout. Like, is that because I'm burnt out? Like I'm doing too much at work? Like just kind of reflecting, like you mentioned before, about little habits like in your personal life, I think are really helpful. And then not only noticing when you're burnt out, because then you're like, oh, I have this problem, I don't know how to solve it. But also paying attention to those moments where you do feel good and reflecting. I think a lot of people do those like grateful journals, but I really like to see, I really like to pay attention to when I'm feeling like engaged, when I'm feeling excited for the next thing, when I'm really looking forward and excited about what's coming. So I try to make sure that I have at least like one trip or like one really fun thing planned that at the end of the day, I can always just resort to like thinking about my happy place. It's planned, the tickets, I know what seat I'm sitting in on the airplane. I think that having something like set in stone ahead of time is very helpful for me personally. I also think having like something creative to do, whether it's like painting or whether it's, I don't know, just trying new things, trying new things.
And see, and basically have developed more than one practice.
And just have fun. I mean, a lot of people like don't paint because they're like, oh, I'm a really bad drawer. It's like, well, look at this painting. I mean, do you think that person was like a good drawer? Like you just have to put stuff on a canvas and, just at the end of it, it's just to look back and say like, oh, I did something today from start to finish. I got it done and now I can appreciate it and look at it. And I think that noticing those things about yourself that make you feel good is almost just as important of noticing when you are feeling burnt out, because then you can start to put those things in your everyday life or at least once or twice a week to really avoid it in the first place. Yeah. So I know when I start getting takeout for dinner 2 or 3 nights in a row, I'm like, I need to do something fun this weekend.
Where's the next trip to?
I'm going to visit my friend in Georgia. The state in November, like right after Thanksgiving.
That'll be nice.
So I'm very excited.
Tickets are bought, and it's something to look forward to. And during all the horrible months of the pandemic and the shutdown, boy, we just couldn't find too many ways to do what you've just described. Yet, what I experienced, my wife did, we decided that, well, if we're going to be basically housebound, then let's enjoy the fact that we have each other, a roof over our head, there's food coming through the door, even though we took great risks to go get it. And we realized how fortunate it was for us who've been married now for 58 years to have another year. Wow. At the same time. Thank you. And at the same time, Peter succumbed, I think, to COVID. Half a dozen other people in our age group that we knew did. I mean, COVID ended them. It wasn't like now where because of the wonderful vaccinations, that we maybe get something relatively mild. It was final, and so it was a very gloomy time. And so your perspective on taking responsibility for your happiness is wonderful. In fact, I'm thinking, boy, there should be a Jess Maura podcast.
Oh man!
You just roll out some of those great tips.
Maybe one day. We'll see.
Yeah, they could be, and that's another thing to try. It's actually, you get a headset and spend a ton of money, and you'll have a podcast, and you'll learn nothing back except you have a lot of fun meeting people, or in our case, having a reunion. As we have only a minute or two left, it's been rocketing through on time here. Do you have any questions or curiosities that you'd like to have me respond to?
I guess, like, from your perspective of, like, after talking to anyone or everyone or anyone, is there anything that you kind of pick up as a theme besides your practice theme? Is there anything else that you pick up from your guests, your co-hosts, whatever you call us?
I guess. Yes. And pick up is the right word. It's absorption, if you will, in a sense. I explained to someone very recently who was curious, a person in my age group, was curious, why are we going to have a spontaneous conversation in a podcast instead of letting me prepare, a bunch of notes and then interview me? And I said, well, it's not an interview. It's like a sketch. I'm sketching you. It's the best I can do in 30 or some minutes. Is if you were sitting in front of me and I had a charcoal pencil and on a blank screen, I'd be looking at you and I would pick out not every detail. I would have an impression of you as a person, and it would reflect your exterior. But basically, if I was really good as a sketch artist, I would get a sense of your interior. And this is what happens to me when I'm having conversations like I am with you. And then afterwards I sit and with this headset and I go through and I edit it just a little bit, a few pauses here and there. And then as I'm doing that, I'm thinking, I'm getting more and more of a feel for what makes you tick, what makes you, Jess, a special person, and who isn't special, but your specialness comes through. I would not get that if we were doing a formal interview. No. Tell us 5 things about the payrolls world that we don't know. Someone should ask you that, but I'm more interested in what it's meant to you to have found the payroll location in a wonderful company that's doing very necessary things to help people extend the quality of their lives. And you're happy about it, and you're going to Georgia after Thanksgiving.
Yep.
So I think of those as now well over 100 of these sketches. What does that have to do with conjecturing about the nature of practice? One thing Peter and I agreed is that most people are in some sort of practice state by intention and by continuous effort. So there's no one who's less interesting than someone else, even though some of them have very impressive titles and resumes. But all of us are humans trying to use the time we have in life to the best advantage for others and ourselves. So there's plenty to learn there, but the uniqueness of each person is what makes the study of practice and practitioners different than what he and I would do when we're studying organizational levels of behavior. It's easier to make these macro views. I could read the profile of your company, and I could show a case study on it, and it would be of interest. But it would be very different than if I were trying to show a case study of Jess Maura. It would not fly. It would not be who you are at this moment, and what you're probably going to be even much more going forward. So, yes, I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm really loved having a chance to sketch.
A little caricature.
Not one of those. I got a caricature of me when I retired from when I had a big retirement event at school, and I look at it. I can't put it on the screen now, or I'll be using up more of the listeners' time. But it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's funny.
It's a caricature, but in your case, I think it's a portrait.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
it's been great talking to you. I appreciate you reaching out, and it's always good to catch up and see how people are doing. It's been almost a decade. It's been like 8 years. So it's been enough time to see some difference in people's paths at this point and see the momentum they got going. So it's a good time to catch up.
And the pace at which change is happening, and you're running to stay up with it and get a little ahead of it. I'm sure that if I reconnect with you in a few months, there'd be even more stories to tell. And that's the fun of this work.
Yeah, it's great.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Practice Podcast, where we discuss practice with a capital P. If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to inactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to inactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
Oh, and one more thing. How could I forget? The book on practice as a way of being is available now in digital form, something that would be new, like podcasting to many of us. And it's a great way of learning more and more about what this podcast presented when Peter Vale and I originated it several years ago. So please come to mylibrary.world/practice, and you'll see what I mean. Thank you.